Hi, welcome everyone. Welcome to Coffee Conversations. I am Stacy Sintz, your host, and you guys are in for a real treat. And actually, Allie, I don't know if you know this, but you are the inspiration for this show. I was feeling like I wanted to do this, but it was being on your podcast and meeting you that gave me the courage to do this. So
That's
we are here today
crazy.
because of you.
Love that. And yeah, it's my favorite thing is interviewing people and just talking to interesting women mainly. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, welcome. You are such an inspiration, and your podcast is amazing. And we're
Thank
going
you.
to dive into all the cool things you're doing, but I always like backing it on up a little bit before we start and go forward. I think it's fun to talk about, our first job and our current job. So, where did you begin your professional career?
Okay. So when I was 16, this is going to date me, but I started teaching aerobics at this place called Women's Workout World. I was an aerobics instructor in the 90s.
Oh my God, I love it.
Yes, and like full on like leotard, like the whole thing. Like I had all the gear. I taught step aerobics and I taught like toning classes, and it was Women's Workout World. So it was an only female like health club. And I would go there after school and teach classes from like 3:30 to like 9 p.m. Like never been more fit in my life.
Oh my
It
God, that's
was
awesome.
fun. I loved it. I actually loved it. And then I went on to teach in college too. I did like step aerobics. So if you like
Nice.
Google that, you'll find out how old I am immediately.
Well, I taught Zumba for a little while, so it's
Did
not
you?
no surprise I loved you. Yeah,
Oh
I taught
my God, I
Zumba in
can
my
see
20s. It
that.
was so fun.
What was your favorite like Zumba song?
Oh, girl, that is a good question. That I am not good on the spot. You know what? It's embarrassing. I actually really Justin Bieber. You guys can all judge me for
I
this.
love
Justin
Justin Bieber.
Bieber, his song "Baby" would be like a fun song to sort of start things off.
Yes,
Oh my gosh,
I'm
really.
a believer. I'm a believer. I like him.
Definitely. I am a big nerd at heart. Well, and then what are you up to currently? So you started doing aerobics at a young age, teaching aerobics, and then these days, what's keeping you busy professionally? All sorts of
So
things, but
I'm in the fertility and infertility world now, almost entirely. Like that's pretty much the main stuff that I'm working on. So I started my podcast, Infertile AF, in 2019. We're actually about to have our 5th anniversary this month, next week, which is wild. It's gone by so fast. But basically, I had a infertility journey myself, secondary infertility. I have a daughter who's 14 now and a son who's 8. And the reason they're so far apart was because it was really hard for me to have my second child. I didn't know anything about fertility, infertility. I didn't know anything about my own body, reproduction. Like I was so completely clueless about all of it.
yes.
When I was having trouble at like 38 having a baby, I, was like, what's going on? And, it's so we talked about this when you were on my
Yeah.
podcast, but it's so frustrating, like the lack of sex education and, that we all got growing up. It was basically like, don't get pregnant. It's so easy to be pregnant, and
Yeah, so you're like
I
deathly
didn't
afraid,
know
right?
anything.
Someone's gonna
So I ended up having, a bunch of miscarriages and ended up going through IUIs that didn't work. And then I did IVF to have my son. And thankfully, it was successful and he's here now. So that inspired me. I'm a journalist. I worked in magazines for, 2 decades, basically. And like I said, I love talking to people. I love interviewing people. It inspired me to start the podcast when he was a couple years old and I was like out of the trauma of it all, because infertility is very traumatic.
Yes,
I
it
still
really
get
is.
I still get like visceral reactions to certain things. We can talk about that more later. But so I was like, no one's talking about this stuff.
Yes.
Again, the podcast came out 5 years ago. So a lot has changed since then for the better. And a lot of, there's a lot more podcasts, there's a lot more books, there's a lot more resources, and there's a lot more conversations, which is wonderful, which is my whole goal. But, when I was going through it, I was like on an island. I didn't really have that
Yes.
friends who had gone through it. I have wonderful friends and family, but I couldn't talk to anybody about specifically like what I was dealing with. And it was really, really hard. So I vowed, after I had my son, that I would help people coming after me and try to make it suck less and try to make it easier for them, you know? So I thought,
Yeah.
put the podcast out. The first episode is me telling my story. And because I was like, if I'm going to expect people to share their, you know, down and dirty and traumatic and, you know, wonderful, also like all their real experiences, I have to talk the talk. So I did the first
Yeah.
episode myself. My husband was on our 100th episode, which is really interesting because he talks about, you know, we went through it together, obviously, but he
Yes.
had a really different experience than me. So hearing everything through his point of view was really interesting. We had to have some drinks before we did that interview. I was like,
I didn't even listen to that,
nervous.
but that was fun.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
So anyway, so I started the podcast, and then the podcast led to Fertility Rally, which is a community that I co-founded with this wonderful woman, Blair Nelson, who I met through my podcast actually and through Instagram. She and I, you know, decided to create a space that wasn't existent, which is support groups and events and just a community of people that are going through infertility and building their families through assisted reproductive technology. And it's really grown into this amazing community where we have, you know, hundreds of people around the world, mostly US and Canada, but we do have a couple people in like different countries and stuff, which is very cool. So we have Fertility Rally. And like I said, we do support groups virtually. We do IRL and virtual events. We have private Facebook groups, and it's just become this family that is just really, really wonderful.
I love seeing that.
The third thing, if you want a very long-winded answer, is wrote a book. So I'm going to hold it up. So this is my new children's book. It's called Work of Art. So art being assisted reproductive technology. And it's basically my family's story. Here we are.
Oh, that's so cute.
It's my family story about, you know, how our family was built and how, you know, it's about me telling Sonny, my son, that he was born through IVF. You know, it's a pretty true depiction of what actually happened in our, you know, conversation. You know, he overheard me talking about it and was like, "What did you say about Ivy?"
Oh,
and I was like, "Oh, that's how you were born. You were born in a very, very cool way." So the book just came out, and, you know, it's for young readers, like 4 to 8, but it's also younger, older, everybody. So I'm currently, you know, out and about promoting the book and doing events, and I have a bookstore reading tomorrow, and I had one last week, and it's been very cool to have this out in the world as just a conversation starter. You know, it's people whose kids were born this way through, you know, IVF or ART, but it's also for families that maybe want to know more about it, or kids who want to learn more about it. You know, we obviously it's talked about in a very like palatable, accessible way. It doesn't get super duper detailed, but we talk about how, you know, my son was basically made in a lab, and you know, and he's like, "What, like a superhero?" And I'm like, "Yeah, exactly." So it's basically, you know, normalizing the conversation around IVF. And, you know, we talk about secondary infertility a little bit in the book and losses, you know, and again, it's very palatable for kids. And the illustrations, my God, I found this amazing illustrator, Federico Bonavicini. He just really, like, it's such a beautiful, he's so talented. So that's part of the thing that people are really loving about the book is, you know, it's just, it looks very cool, and it's really, you know, it's really bright, and it's really fun. And, you know, it's talking about a hard subject, but making it accessible. And like I said, a jumping off point for if you want to read the book and then have more of a conversation later, but, you know, about what you've been through, or, you know, delve into it more, you can.
Oh, such good stuff. And, you know,
sorry.
No, you've done so much, and it's so fascinating. And, you know, definitely, obviously, for personal reasons, care about the infertility side of what you're doing. But I also, from a business perspective, so many people want to start podcasts. So many people want, you know, to start communities. So many people are thinking about becoming an author. So I think there's a lot of interesting professional components to this, on top of obviously the personal component of navigating something as hard and as traumatic as infertility. And you really, you know, you launched a podcast 5 years ago, right? I feel like today everyone's trying to launch a podcast.
Mhm.
What are some lessons? And don't worry, we'll get back into the book and all the fun
Yeah.
infertility stuff too. But
Yeah.
just from a professional standpoint, if someone's listening, they're like, oh my God, that's so cool. I have something I want to talk about too, because I do think something as taboo as fertility and things like that, and making it more public and more, you know, attainable for others is really important. And
Right.
there's other people who want to do something similar. What are some things
Right.
you learned about in terms of being podcast?
Yeah.
Right? You have done so many episodes.
Yeah. Thank you.
So what advice do you have for people that are like, I want to do that?
I have to give a shout out to my friend Kara Olwell, who she has an amazing podcast and brand and franchise. Champagne Diet is her handle. And her podcast is called Style Your Mind. And she's written tons of books, and she's a very successful coach. She and I used to ride SoulCycle together and became friends. And she was the one who really inspired me from a female like business point of view. She already had her podcast and it was very successful. And I was like, I want to do this thing. How do I do it? And she was like, just do it. Just here's the microphone you need. Here's the platform I use. Here's a person who might be able to help you on the, audio engineering, editing side, and just do it. Just start it. Because, I'll backtrack a little bit and say, I tried to write a book about almost like a memoir / guide about what I went through with IVF, and I was going to call it IVF AF. I wrote like the book proposal, and I wrote, all the stuff, and I shopped it around to publishers, and every response I got from publishers or agents, I was looking for an agent, was, the writing's great. It's really entertaining, but no one's going to buy this book. There's no market for this book. And I was like, what do you mean? How? And they're like, we already have an IVF book coming out this year. And not just like per publisher, it was like in total, like they're like, there's one coming out this spring. And I'm like, okay, but can't there be another one? I was so baffled. So Kara and I started talking about the book and, waiting for someone to greenlight your idea. And it's such a bummer. And oftentimes it takes so long and you get rejected. And she's got this famous story about being rejected a million times and just doing stuff on her own and being wildly successful on her own. So she was the one who said, you just do it. Like, don't wait for someone to greenlight it, So the podcast, I didn't have to get anybody to give me the okay. I just did it. I just recorded my episode and I put it out in the world. And I got a friend to do the music for me and a friend to do the logo for me. And I just put it out there and was like, I hope people listen to it. And then it just grew and grew and grew and grew and grew. Which is, I guess the lesson there is like, just do it. Like, just don't wait for anybody to tell you can do it. Just try it, do it,
How did you keep going? I'm sure everybody, when they start, it's like, their mom watches, a couple of neighbors watch it, it's like a slow build before it really takes off. And it's really the long game, and that can really be hard.
It is hard. Instagram was a huge, help. And I think that really helped it get out there. Now 5 years later, it's like 1.5 million or like 1.5 million downloads almost, which is wild to me that many people have heard these stories. I think the 266th episode is out this week. So there's, and there's something for everybody. It's all different types of stories, and some of them are really sad and some of them are funny, and, they're all very real though. So I don't know. I think that it helped that, having a journalism background, I have editor friends who helped me get a little press at the beginning of my launch. There's an article in People magazine, thanks to my friend Jillian Telling. There was something in Pop Sugar. So I think that started to kind of get the ball rolling, but I really truly think it was just word of mouth. And, once people in the TTC community, as we call it, trying to conceive community, I think once people started listening to it, it just kind of like people told their friends about it, and that's how it all happened. But, I'm really grateful for everybody that's given it, given it a listen and downloaded it and subscribed to it and all that stuff. But it's still a hustle. I'm still trying to get it out there even more. And I feel like the work really never stops.
That is definitely true.
Because there's nobody to tell you you're only as successful as you are going to make it, so it's like there's always something more to do.
Totally. And I found it because of a former Rise member, Kristen Thompson, was on it.
I love
Kristen Thompson's amazing. A little shout out to her. She has such a great story and such an inspiration. And her episode was awesome.
Yeah, and Kristen is a Fertility Rally member, so that's how I met her. And we did a event in Chicago last summer, and she was there, so I got to meet her in person, which was really cool. But yeah, I feel like, I don't know if you feel this way too, but so much of female success too, I would say, is just, oh, you should meet this person, and my friend, and that's how I met you, and that's Kristen heard about Fertility Rally from somebody else, and it's just people helping each other out and giving each other resources. I think that has a lot to do with successful female brands and, products and things like that. It's just word of mouth.
Totally. And that sort of leads us to your Fertility Rally. I mean, how cool that you have this community on top of this amazing podcast. How has that been different, building a community versus building a podcast following? I'm sure there's similarities, but I bet there's also some different challenges.
Yes,
uniqueness to that.
Because, you're dealing with hundreds of people, and, I would say, honestly, it was kind of like a happy accident, the way that it started. It started during the pandemic. Like, we were on COVID lockdown, and Blair and I were talking about, wanting to start this community. And we first started doing like Zoom calls with people in the Instagram community that we've met. And we're like, do you want to hop on a Zoom and just like talk about what you're going through? And, we put stuff on Instagram, like, we're going to do this Zoom event, come join us. And it was, free. People started coming to these, and then we're like, I think we have something here. I think people need this. So we decided to make it an actual business and a membership community. And I mean, honestly, like, we didn't really know what we were doing at all. And I think that's kind of also another like good business lesson I've learned, is like, sometimes if you know less about something, you're more apt to just do it and try it. Because if I would have known all the like obstacles and hurdles and so hard and complicated it was going to be, and don't get me wrong, we love it and it's amazing, but it's been hard, I think if I would have known that, I might have been more hesitant to dive in as like fully as we did, because we just dove straight in and we were like, we're launching it June 1st. It's, and like, we just like launched it and people started joining and we're like, oh my God. So it's been really cool. And I mean, the people, our tagline is the worst club with the best members, because nobody wants to be in this infertility club, but the people who are absolutely incredible. And, talking about helping each other out. It's like, we host the support group every single Wednesday night. We've been doing it since 2020. Never missed a week. And it's just these women who are lifting each other up and crying together and laughing together. But the friendships that have been formed and the bonds that have been formed in Fertility Rally they blow my mind on a weekly basis. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, creating that safe space where people can just come in. And because a lot of times you can't talk about this at work, and your husband doesn't understand as much as they're trying to be supportive and wonderful.
Right.
Your friends maybe get it, but creating this really safe space, I think, is so cool. And I'm not surprised. And that, I call that blissful ignorance.
Totally.
I had that same blissful ignorance when I was launching some of my other companies. And you're right, you have to have it. I shouldn't say you have to have it. It's really nice to have that blissful ignorance, because it definitely gets you like getting out there and doing things that, now that I know what I know, I'm like, would I have done all that? I don't know.
Totally. And with the rally, it's just kind of evolved as we've grown in numbers, and the need, we're like, oh, we should add this, and then we should do this. And we do this thing called Fertility Rally Live twice a year in April and October. We have one coming up next month, and it's a virtual event, but speakers and giveaways, and just a wonderful day of like empowerment and support, and people come and watch all this stuff together, and there's like interactive chat, and it's really great. But again, it was like, I don't know, we didn't know what we were doing when we did our first one, and now we're on our 8th one is coming up, which is kind of cool.
Well, I think that's so inspiring to hear that. Yeah, because from the outside looking in, it's so well done. You have such a large following. So I think that that's really motivating for people who are watching and listening and thinking, wait, could I pull that off?
Right.
And I know that it sort of came out of COVID and starting all on virtual. That's one thing, but now that you can now do things in real life too, how has that transition been? I think a lot of people are trying to figure out,
Yeah.
how do we show up on virtual? How do we show up in person? What's that hybrid world that we're navigating? How have you guys navigated that?
I think we've learned that the virtual aspect is really, really beneficial for our support groups. Because people are all over the place. We have people in Hawaii and people in Washington and people in LA and Chicago. And, I'm in Jersey, she's in Austin. It's funny, speaking of virtual, Blair and I actually never met in person until we'd been working together for like a year and a half. We
Oh my
finally
gosh.
got together, which was wild. Everything was on Zoom or phone calls.
Yeah.
So the virtual has been really good for stuff like that, and Fertility Rally Live, which is a virtual event, because again, we can reach the masses, and it doesn't matter where you are, you can join in. But the IRL stuff has been really great too. Like we did a whole weekend in Chicago and it was called Rally IRL. And we had probably 35 people come in. Some people were local, which was great, but we did like a whole weekend long thing and it was
Wow.
awesome. I mean, it was like, these are my sisters now, like they were before, but even more so just spending time with people. And like, there's something about the fertility community too, where like, you just cut through the like BS, like you're instantly on a deeper level of friendship. Like it's so, because going through like a traumatic experience or, a very, very difficult experience, even if it's different from somebody else's, if you're in the same kind of world, that those bonds are just unbreakable. So that's been really, really cool to just take it to the next level with some of our members. And, we'll be doing another one hopefully this summer too.
Oh, do you have any ideas what city you'll be entering into?
No, we try to keep it. We did Chicago because it's kind of central and it's easy to fly into from everywhere. I'm not really sure. Somebody wanted to go on a cruise. Somebody pitched a cruise to us. We were like, that would be fun, but probably really expensive. And that's another thing about the, fertility community. Like people are paying out of their, armpits. Probably can't swear on LinkedIn. I swear on my podcast. I've been like biting my tongue. People been paying an arm and a leg for fertility treatments. A lot of it's not covered.
Right.
So we have to be, really budget conscious too. And that's part of, I guess speaking of business, that's part of the reason Fertility Rally memberships are very inexpensive, because we want people to get the help. We want people to get the support. It's not thousands of dollars. Our annual membership's $249, and you can get 5 to 6 support groups a week with that if you want.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And good for you for doing that. I would put a vote in for Denver. I'm not going to lie. I think it'd be fabulous if you came out this way. And it's not exactly center. It is easy to get to, as we have a huge, our airport's pretty fabulous.
Okay. All right. And I think ASMR is in Denver this year.
I think it is too.
Convention. Okay. I might be coming to that.
Keep that in mind. I'll be at that conference as well, but I'll be on it. I'll be there representing donor conceived rights and what we're advocating for.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So hopefully I'll see you there. Yeah. Now, so you start this podcast, you're killing it there. Then you start this community and that's going well. And so, you mentioned a little bit about the inspiration about your son. How different was it to do this whole new thing? I mean, again, you're yes, you're an author and you had, written a book in some ways, trying to get that pitch but this children's book is a very different endeavor. You had to find someone to design it, all those things.
Totally. And again, it was just like, I don't know, like ask around, I ask a lot of questions. I guess that's the journalist background in me. And, can you help me with this? Can you help me? I'm never afraid to ask for help, because I feel like you don't know what you don't know. And there's people out there that can help you with very specific things. So, I had a goal in 2023. Like I was like, I want to put out this children's book this year. And I finally just sat down and wrote it. And again, self-published. I didn't wait for a publisher to give me the green light, because I didn't want, I'm kind of impatient by nature, and I didn't want to wait. I was like, it's not going to come out for like another year probably. And I've also heard from people like Kara Alwell, who I was talking about earlier, who self-published a lot of her books, but she's also done deals with actual publishers. And she was like, doing it on your own is better. Like, it's more lucrative. You have more control. I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I've heard other people say, like, sometimes they say they're going to do all this stuff for you marketing wise and PR, and they don't, things like that. So I was like, sounds like a lot of like drama that I don't want. Like, I just want to, put this out myself. I found the illustrator through, again, just put out something on Instagram, was like, does anybody know a great children's book illustrator or illustrator in general? Got a bunch of names, talked to a bunch of different people. But when I met Fed, his style was so cool, and he was so cool. And it was just such a good match. He was really fun to work with. And just a little side story, we would like go back and forth. He'd send me storyboards. And then I'd say, oh, can you change? There's like little Easter eggs in the book. Like, I was like, can you change the rear view mirror, like what's hanging down, and make it my podcast logo instead of like the palm or like the evergreen tree, that you had there. And like, can you have my sweatshirt say Worst Club, Best Members, which is our Fertility Rally title. So little things like that are in the book. I sent him like pictures of our house and pictures of everybody in the family, including my dog who's behind me. Pictures of the sunglasses that I wear, like little things like that to make it really real. And people who know us and people that know like the fertility world can find these little Easter eggs, which I thought would be really fun for them.
That's so
yeah.
Well, and I think that's really cute. I think you're bringing up something that a lot of people forget about, right? I think when you start something, a lot of people feel insecure to look like they don't have it all together, and they try to act all buttoned up and like tell this story that everything's perfect and things are great and I'm fabulous and I know what I'm doing. And I think such an important lesson that you're talking about is it doesn't sound like that's who you've ever been. You're willing to ask the question. You're willing to ask for help and say like, hey, what should I do? Who should I talk to? And I think that's a really important thing to call out, because a lot of people aren't willing to do that.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I don't think you can do stuff without, that's why I'm so drawn to communities and, like the community of Fertility Rally or like Soul Cycle community, things like I just never want to do stuff alone. Like I feel like I always want people to be helping me and, pulling people in. I have to give a shout out to my sister, Kim Lundgren too, who is amazing and has been helping me so much with my website and the marketing of my book and just so many other business things that I'm not good at all. And she's really good at it. So again, just, being like, I suck at this. Can you do this part? And, we always joke that we're like such a good team. Like, she's able to do all the stuff that I'm not able to do. So that's been really, really cool to work with her too. So, again, like I'm not afraid to be like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Like, help.
Yes. Well, and so you got this book written. You have an amazing designer, illustrator. It's beautiful. And now you're out telling the world about it. Where can someone come find you? I know you're selling online, but it also sounds like you're doing some cool events too. How can people learn more about the book? And I do agree. Like, I know you said age 4, but I think it is so important to tell this story before they even understand. And so there was like never a time that they didn't understand their origin. I think that's so cool
too. Yeah. And you've got such an interesting story yourself. But yeah, I think that just making it, like I said, normalizing the conversation. A really cool thing happened yesterday, actually. So my son is in grammar school. He's in 2nd grade, and his grade school librarian, I wrote to the PTA and I was like, I have this book coming out. Would you guys, be interested? Can we talk about it with this school? And they were like, the librarian would love a copy of it. So I dropped it off at the library at his school, and she wrote me this really sweet note and was like, I love, how you've made this so accessible for kids. You've taken a hard subject, and, big compliment, which made me cry basically. And then she's like, I'm turning it into a library book right now. My son yesterday, he had library day on Thursday. He went in and he was like, do you have work of art? Asked the librarian. And she's like, oh, that's the book. She goes, somebody checked it out. And I was like, oh, God. Which like made my day, just to think that like, some kid might have just seen the cover and thought it looked cool. And, oh, there's a book about basketball or, whatever, or it's bright, it's poppy. And then they might have brought it home. And I don't know if this kid was born through, ART or IVF, but if not, like, I love the notion that kids are going to be learning about this and, knowing, like, there's a line in the book where Sunny's like, I don't think Jack was made in a lab. And, the mom, me, basically was like, you never know. A lot of kids were born through ART,
Yes.
So just to think that it's like out in other people's homes and families and all that is really cool. So yes, it's at libraries. I'm donating a bunch of different libraries. It is on my website, which is infertileafgroup.com. Thank you, Kim Lundgren, for setting that up. And then it's also available now. It's going to be starting to be in bookstores and places like Target and stuff, because I just loaded it onto this site where like bookstores can order it and like print it on demand and have it go to their another
wow.
I knew nothing about. And I was like, oh, I guess I need to learn how to navigate this too. So hopefully it'll be everywhere. But for now, the best place to go is my website. And we can do a personalized version or just a non-personalized version. A lot of people have been buying them as gifts for people, which has been really cool.
Yeah, I think people are always like, what's a good gift to give somebody? And I think this is such a perfect gift.
Yeah.
Going through it. Now you're just, so in case people, so I'm from St. Louis, I live in Denver.
Yeah.
So I don't want people to assume it's bookstores in those cities. You're in New Jersey.
I'm in Jersey.
Is it, but it could potentially end up in our bookstores given that you put it on that platform.
Yeah, we're hopefully going to, be expanding and bookstores, once they get word of it, we'll start hopefully ordering it and things like that. So I'm starting out, it's very grassroots right now. I'm like going door to door, basically like, hi.
You got to start somewhere. I mean, it's an awesome book and I love to see it getting out there, and any help I can to promote it, I think is awesome. And I think your story is so powerful, right? You have these ideas and these desires and you just get out there and do it. And I think seeing other people have that kind of courage is inspiring and gives other people courage. Like, wait a minute, I can do it too.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. That means a lot. It's, I mean, I guess it's the ignorance is bliss thing, right? Like if I knew how complicated this would be and I'm learning about like, oh, sales tax and, things like this that I wasn't really considering when I wrote the book, but it's all a work in progress, and hopefully
it makes me think of Marie Forleo. She has a quote, something like everything's figure outable, and it really is. It so is. Well, and that leads me to my signature question that was inspired by Sarah Blakely, which is, if you were to write a message on your coffee cup that every woman could read every day and be inspired by, what would it be?
So I stole this from, it might have been like John Hamm, which is a very random from Mad Men, random reference, but I feel like I saw him in a talk show and he said this and I was like, I love that. But it was basically something his mom said to him when he was like struggling or wanting to succeed in his field. And it was, I could be totally butchering this and I don't know if it was him, maybe it wasn't. But anyway, the quote is, "Why shouldn't it be you?" Which I thought was such a good, cool, like, why shouldn't it be you that writes a book or starts a coffee conversations show? Or, like, why shouldn't it be you? And I just thought that's so cool. I love that. So that would be
mine. I do too. Well, I know that women and men watching this are going to want to follow you more. You've talked about where someone can go to get your book, but before we wrap up, why don't you share where they can follow you to learn more about your podcast, follow along in your journey, getting all this off the ground? Where can they go to follow you?
So the podcast is called Infertile AF and it's on all the platforms. So you just Google it or go on to whatever, Apple or Spotify, whatever. It's on there. It's totally free. The book is on my website, Infertile AF Group. And then Instagram is probably the best place to follow me. So my handle is Infertile AF Stories. So you can go there and see content from the podcast and quotes and photos of the people that are on my show and a whole bunch of other things and events and things like that too. So those are the best places. But I also just want to throw out there, like, I'm very accessible. My DMs are open. If anybody is going through something and wants to talk or needs like a hand, like, please reach out to me because like I said, I felt so alone. I never want anyone to feel alone. You know, I can put you in contact with other people, but please, like, if you're going through something, reach out and we'll get you some support and some help.
Well, thank you so much. You're such an inspiration, and
Oh my
I
gosh,
love that you
love
took something
talking
that's
to you.
traumatic. Yes. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. We'll see you next week.